The day I got my acceptance letter to Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, I called my mother first. She picked up on the third ring. I could hear the TV in the background, some afternoon talk show she always had running. I told her. I said the words out loud for the first time. I got in. Full scholarship. Johns Hopkins. There was a pause. Well, she said, your brother just got a new job at the dealership. Assistant manager. We're taking him out to dinner Friday if you want to come. I stood in my apartment parking lot for a long time after she hung up. The letter was still in my hand. The ink was still fresh. That was 7 years ago. I know now that I should have understood everything I needed to understand about my family in that single moment. But I didn't. I kept trying. That's the part I'm most embarrassed about, not what they did to me, what I kept doing to myself. My name is Ivy, and I'm 31 years old. I'm an emergency medicine resident at a hospital in Baltimore. I work 60-hour weeks. I haven't taken a vacation in 3 years, and for most of my adult life, I believed that if I just achieved enough, my family would eventually look at me and feel something. I grew up in a small town in central Ohio. My parents, my mother and my stepfather, ran a small landscaping business. My older brother, 2 years ahead of me, was the one everyone talked about at church, at the grocery store, at every family gathering where someone would ruffle his hair and say that boy's going places. He was funny and loud and easy, the kind of person a room rearranges itself around. I was quieter. I read too much. I got straight A's and nobody mentioned it. My biological father left when I was 4. I have exactly 2 memories of him: the smell of his jacket, which was leather and cigarettes, and the sound of a door closing. My stepfather came into the picture when I was 7. He wasn't cruel. He just never quite looked at me directly, the way you avoid eye contact with someone you don't know how to talk to. Over time, that became the shape of our relationship: careful, cordial, and hollow. I used to make excuses for all of it. They were busy. They were tired. My brother was just easier to celebrate because his wins were visible. Touchdowns, promotions, things you could toast with a beer. My wins were in textbooks and exam scores and things that required explanation. I told myself they were proud of me in their own way. People can be proud without saying it. I told myself that for 24 years. I met my husband during my 2nd year of med school. He was doing his residency in cardiology, and we met at the worst possible place, a hospital cafeteria at 11:30 at night. Both of us eating vending machine sandwiches like they were fine dining because we hadn't had a real meal since 6 that morning. He made me laugh on that first night, which was something I hadn't done in a while. We dated for 3 years before he proposed. When he did, on a Tuesday evening in our apartment, with a ring he'd clearly spent too much on and a speech he'd clearly rehearsed, I said yes before he finished the sentence. I called my mother that same night. She said congratulations and asked if we'd set a date yet. She asked what kind of ring it was. Then she told me my brother's girlfriend had just moved in with him, and wasn't that exciting? They might be getting serious. I told my husband later that night when he asked how the call went. I laughed about it. I'd gotten good at laughing about it. We planned the wedding for 14 months out. The venue was a restored farmhouse, about 40 minutes outside Baltimore, the kind of place with string lights and an old oak tree and a barn that had been redone with white oak floors. It was exactly what I'd wanted. We sent invitations in January. My mother, my stepfather, my brother and his girlfriend, my aunts and uncles on my mother's side. The whole family, all accounted for, all invited months in advance. My mother called in March to say she needed to know the exact schedule, because they were thinking about driving up Friday night instead of Saturday morning. I took that as a yes. My brother called me 6 weeks before the wedding, not to ask if I needed help, not to ask how planning was going. He called because he needed money. He and his girlfriend were looking at houses, he said. They'd found one they loved, but they were short on the down payment. He said our parents couldn't help. They'd already lent him money the previous year for a car, and they didn't have more to give. He said I was the only one who could do it. He used the word family 4 times in a 5-minute call. He said $15,000. I want to be clear about what $15,000 means at my stage of training. Residents don't make much. I was working 60-plus hours a week and taking home around $58,000 a year before taxes in one of the most expensive cities on the East Coast. $15,000 was not a casual ask. It was a quarter of my annual take-home. I told him I couldn't do it. I said it kindly. I told him I had wedding expenses, that I was saving for our own future, that I just didn't have that kind of money to give. He said, "You're a doctor. Don't act like you're struggling." I explained again what a resident's salary actually looked like. He said he'd talk to me later and hung up. 2 days after that call, my mother called me. She told me my brother was heartbroken. She said I had always had opportunities he didn't, and that family helped family when it mattered. She said she hoped I would reconsider before the wedding. I said I hadn't changed my mind. She said, "I just hope this doesn't affect things." I didn't know what she meant by things. I should have asked. The morning of my wedding was one of the most beautiful days I've ever seen. Late September in Maryland, the air just starting to turn, the light coming in golden and clean. My bridesmaids were at the venue by 9. My best friend from college, who'd flown in from Portland, was doing my hair. We were drinking mimosas and laughing about nothing, and for a few hours I felt completely light, completely certain that everything in my life had led to this moment, and the moment was going to be good. The ceremony was at 2 o'clock. By 1:15, no one from my family had arrived. I wasn't panicking yet. People run late. There was traffic on I-70 maybe. I texted my mother. "Just checking in. Are you close?" No response. 1:30. My coordinator came to find me in the bridal suite. She said the guests were seated and we'd be starting in about 20 minutes. She had a look on her face she was trying to hide. I asked if my family was out there. She said she wasn't sure. She'd check. She came back and said she didn't see them yet, but that people were still arriving. At 2 o'clock, I walked down the aisle. The rows on the left, my side, were not empty. Friends from med school, colleagues, neighbors I'd known growing up who had made the drive. But the front 2 rows, the seats I'd specifically reserved for my mother, my stepfather, my brother, my aunts and uncles, they were empty. Chairs with little white ribbon markers, a gap so obvious that people kept glancing at it and then glancing away the way you do when you don't want to be caught noticing something. My husband was at the altar. When I reached him and he took my hands, he looked at me and said quietly, "You okay?" I said, "I'm great. Let's get married." And we did. We got married. The ceremony was beautiful. The officiant said words that made people cry. I said my vows, and I meant every syllable. My husband cried, which made me cry, which made my best friend cry so hard she had to fan herself. But the whole time, at the edge of my vision, those white chairs. My phone was in the bridal suite during the ceremony, and when I got back to check it before the reception, there were no missed calls, no texts, nothing from my mother, my stepfather, my brother. I text from one aunt. On my father's side, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, saying congratulations. She'd seen on Facebook that I'd gotten married. That was it. I went to my reception. I danced with my husband. I cut the cake and fed it to him and laughed when he got frosting on my cheek. My friends toasted us and told stories that embarrassed me, and I loved every second of it. I was present. I was genuinely happy. But something had settled into my chest that day that I couldn't shake. Like a stone I'd have to carry for a while before I understood what to do with it. Later that night, after all the guests had gone and we were in our hotel room, I checked my phone one more time. A text from my mother, sent at 10:47 p.m. Something came up. Hope it was nice. We'll catch up soon. That was all. I put my phone face down on the nightstand and didn't pick it up again until morning. We went to Savannah for our honeymoon. 5 days, a little rented house near the historic district, long meals and long walks, and the particular peace of being somewhere nobody can reach you without a good reason. My husband didn't bring up my family. I loved him for that. I needed the space to just be married, to be happy, to not have to process anything yet. I processed it when we got home. I spent 2 weeks going over it quietly, not obsessively, just steadily, the way you work through a diagnosis when all the symptoms finally line up and you realize you've been missing the obvious answer for a long time. What did I actually have with these people? What had I ever had? My mother had never once come to see me at school. Not for orientation, not for white coat ceremony, not for match day when I found out where I'd be for residency. My stepfather had never asked me a single question about my career that I could remember. My brother had missed my college graduation because of a camping trip and had texted congrats with a thumbs up emoji. I had spent my whole life sending them milestones and getting back polite indifference. And when I said no to one financial request, one, after a lifetime of being the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who figured it out herself, they had simply not come to my wedding. Not an argument. Not a confrontation. Just absence. Quiet, coordinated, deliberate absence. I made a decision that November. Not an angry decision. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't in a rage. I was just done. There's a difference between those two things, and the difference matters. Rage means you're still attached to the outcome. Done means you've accepted that there is no outcome to wait for. The version of my family that would one day show up and say we're proud of you did not exist. I had been grieving a loss that had already happened a long time ago. I just hadn't named it yet. I sent my mother a letter. I do everything by letter when it matters. The written word forces honesty and leaves no room for interruption. I told her that her absence at my wedding had made something clear to me that I should have understood sooner. I told her I needed to take space from all of them. I said it calmly, and I said it completely. I didn't list grievances. I didn't ask for an apology. I just told her what I was doing and why, as plainly as I could. Then I set the boundary and I kept it. I didn't block anyone immediately. I just stopped responding. For 3 months, things were quiet. My mother texted a few times. My brother called once and left no voicemail. I didn't respond to any of it. My life continued. Work, my husband, our apartment, the slow building of something that felt like peace. Then, in February, my stepfather got involved. He called on a Sunday afternoon from a number I didn't recognize. He'd used my aunt's phone, I realized later. I picked up by accident. He said hello, and I knew his voice immediately. But I let him talk because I was so surprised by the maneuver that I didn't react fast enough. He said my mother wasn't doing well. He said the family was struggling. He said they needed help. Financial help. For some repairs to the house, an issue with the roof they couldn't cover. He gave me a number, $8,000. I asked how the roof had come up suddenly in February, when I hadn't spoken to any of them since November. He said it had been a problem for a while. I said I was sorry to hear that. He said I was a doctor, and this was family, and he didn't understand why I was being this way, why I couldn't just help when help was needed. I thought about a lot of things in the pause that followed. I thought about those empty chairs. I thought about my mother's text at 10:47 p.m. Something came up. I thought about 24 years of trying. I said, I'm going to send you something. He said, what? I opened my banking app while I had him on the line. I transferred $1 to my mother's Venmo, the account I knew she had because she'd asked me to pay her back for something through it 2 years earlier. In the memo field, I typed, best wishes. Then I said to my stepfather, check mom's Venmo. There was silence. Then I said, I think this concludes things for me. Take care of yourselves. And I hung up. I blocked my mother's number, my stepfather's, my brother's. All of them, one by one, methodically and without drama. Then I put my phone down and went to the kitchen and made tea and sat with my husband on the couch, and we watched a documentary about national parks, and it was one of the most peaceful evenings I can remember. I genuinely thought that was the end of it. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon, I was post-call. I'd worked a 24-hour shift, and I'd been home maybe 4 hours when there was a knock at our apartment door. 2 police officers. And behind them, in the parking lot, my stepfather's truck. I stood in the doorway in my pajamas, completely baffled. One of the officers said they'd received a report of a welfare check request. My stepfather had told them he hadn't been able to reach me and was concerned for my safety. He had driven 2 states from Ohio to stand in my apartment parking lot while police knocked on my door to make sure I was alive. I stood there for a moment and breathed. Then I said I'm a physician. I'm post-call from a 24-hour shift. I am in excellent health. I am not in contact with that man by choice, and I need you to document that I was not requested to be contacted by him. The officer looked at his notepad and then looked at me. You're a doctor? Emergency medicine. Johns Hopkins. He nodded slowly. He turned around and looked at my stepfather's truck in the parking lot and then looked back at me. Ma'am, the report was filed in Ohio. We're required to respond, but there's nothing for us to do here. You're clearly, he gestured vaguely at me, at my living, breathing, entirely fine self. Fine. I said, I know. Thank you for coming anyway. I asked if there was any way to flag that future welfare checks from this individual should be noted as potentially being made in bad faith. The officer took my information. I don't know what actually happens with that kind of request, legally speaking. I've since looked into it, and the answer is complicated. But I asked because I needed to ask. My stepfather had left by the time I closed the door. I went back to bed. I slept for 8 more hours. When I woke up, I called a family law attorney, not because I was planning to take legal action necessarily, but because I needed to understand what tools I had. The attorney told me that using welfare checks as a contact mechanism can, depending on pattern and intent, constitute harassment. She told me to document everything. I did. I want to tell you something that took me a long time to understand, because I think it's the part people get wrong when they talk about cutting off family. Everyone assumes it's an angry decision, that you do it in a blaze, that you deliver a speech, that you walk out of a room and slam a door. And sometimes it is like that. But for me, it wasn't. It was quiet. It was just enough. The accumulation of years of being the one who tried and the one who didn't get tried for in return, and finally being able to see it clearly instead of through the fog of wanting it to be different. The welfare check should have made me furious, and in the moment, some part of me was. But mostly I was just tired. And under the tired, surprisingly, there was this small, clean space that had been growing since November. The space where the Hopkins used to be. I have a colleague at the hospital, a senior attending, who I respect more than almost anyone I've met in medicine. She grew up with a difficult family. She's mentioned it in passing over the years. Once, between patients, she said something that lodged in me. Sometimes the bravest thing you do in your whole life is decide that someone doesn't get to keep taking from you just because of how they're related to you. I thought about that a lot. My brother got married this past spring. I found out through a mutual friend's Instagram. He and his girlfriend, a backyard ceremony, 100 people. I was not invited, which I expected, and which was fine. It was genuinely fine. I looked at the photos once, and then I closed the app and I went back to my life. My life, which is full. My husband and I bought a house last fall, a small row house in a neighborhood in Baltimore that we're slowly making our own. We have a dog now, a ridiculous golden retriever named Biscuit, who takes up most of our bed and has opinions about everything. I'm finishing my residency this June, and I've already accepted a position in the ED here. I have friends who show up. I have a husband who picks up on the first ring. I have never once heard my mother say she was proud of me. I used to think that was a wound I'd carry forever. I think now, most days, the good days, that the absence of those words does not determine the size of what I built. I built it anyway. In the gaps between 30-hour shifts and board exams and every milestone that went by without a call from home, I built it anyway. That's not something they gave me, and it's not something they can take. I started this channel because I kept meeting people, patients, colleagues, friends of friends who were carrying the same specific weight. The family that never quite saw them. The approval they kept reapplying for. The moment when they finally had to reckon with the fact that love, real love, is not something you earn by achieving enough. If you are waiting for someone to finally look at you and feel proud of you, someone who has had 1,000 chances and found reasons each time, I want to say something to you plainly. You are not the problem. You have never been the problem. The weight you've been carrying belongs to them. You don't have to keep holding it. I'm not saying it's easy to set it down. I'm not saying it doesn't cost you something real. It cost me. It cost me the picture of family I'd been building in my head since I was a little girl reading in her room while her brother got the applause. It cost me the hope, and hope is not a cheap thing to lose, even when the hope was hurting you. But on the other side of it, and I'm not going to tell you it's all sunshine, because some days it still aches. On the other side of it, there is something I didn't expect. Room to stop managing their reactions. Room to stop bracing. Room to be whoever I am without holding it up against what they wanted me to be. Room to be loved well by people who choose it every day, without me having to perform anything or explain myself or prove a single thing. That room is worth it. I promise you it's worth it. If any part of this story sat somewhere familiar in your chest, if you felt it in a place you usually try not to touch, I'm glad you're here. Leave a comment. Tell me where you are in it. I read every one. And if today's the day something clicked for you, even just a little, I'm glad it was today. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since that Tuesday afternoon. I opened my door to two police officers and my stepfather's truck idling in the parking lot behind them. Not in a bitter way. More the way you think about it when enough time has passed that you can finally see the whole shape of something instead of just the part that was pressing against you. Here's what I know about the way things actually work. People teach you how to treat them by what they accept. For 24 years, I accepted being the background, the one who achieved quietly and was celebrated quietly, which is to say, not at all. I accepted phone calls where my news was a segue to someone else's. I accepted empty chairs at my wedding and a text at 10:47 at night that said something came up. I accepted all of it because I kept believing that my next achievement would be the one that finally broke through, that Johns Hopkins would do it, that the white coat would do it, that the ring on my finger would do it. It never did. And the reason it never did wasn't a failure of my achievements. It was that I had misunderstood the transaction entirely. There was no achievement large enough because achievement was never what they were measuring. What they were measuring was compliance. And the moment I stopped complying, the moment I said I don't have $15,000 to give you, and I wouldn't give it if I did, the relationship revealed exactly what it had always been. Not love with difficult edges, just a system. And I was the part of the system that was supposed to produce without asking for anything back. The welfare check was the clearest moment of all. My stepfather drove 2 states, coordinated with police, engineered an entire scenario, not because he was worried about me. He was fine with me being unreachable for months. He was fine with empty chairs at my wedding. He drove 2 states because the $1 had landed. Because I had finally, clearly, in a language that required no interpretation, communicated that I understood what was happening and I was choosing not to participate anymore. The welfare check wasn't concern. It was a last attempt at control dressed up in the language of care. Once you can see that distinction, you cannot unsee it. I think about Ivy, about the version of me who stood in a parking lot holding an acceptance letter while my mother talked about my brother's new job, and I want to tell her something. Not that it gets easier right away. It doesn't. The grief is real and it takes time, and there are still days, even now, when something good happens, and my first instinct is to reach for a phone that will ring in a house that won't celebrate me. That instinct is slower now. It's getting quieter. What I want to tell her is this: the life you're going to build will be built by you. The discipline that got you through organic chemistry at midnight, the resilience that got you through 30-hour shifts in your first year, the integrity that made you say, I can't give you money I don't have, when it would have been so much easier to give in. Those things came from inside you. They were not given to you by people who withheld their pride like a bargaining chip. You made them yourself, and everything you build from them will be yours, in a way nothing conditional ever could be. That's not a small thing. That's actually the whole thing.